Why did the crowd freeze when the palace guard moved forward without saying a single word? That question echoed, not just in the square where the tourists stood, but in her mind too. She wasn't part of them, not really. Not a tourist, not a spectator. And yet she found herself staring at that silent, armored figure, wondering how much could be said without a single word spoken. The city was alive with sound, the shuffle of feet, the low hum of voices, the wings of pigeons cutting the sky. But in her chest there was only quiet, a quiet so heavy it seemed to press against her ribs, a silence that wasn't absence but weight. Her orders had brought her here, tucked among strangers. No one saw the edge in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. They saw only another woman with a scarf wrapped tight, camera in hand, gaze tilted upward like the rest. But she wasn't like the rest. She wasn't here for ceremony. And yet the ceremony played out. The palace guard took one step forward, just one. His boots struck the cobblestones with a sharp, resonant beat that cut across the courtyard. Tourists froze mid-whisper, mid-laugh, mid-gesture. The ripple of stillness spread outward, sudden and unspoken. One step, no words, and the entire crowd fell into awe. She didn't breathe, because deep down she understood what silence could do, what it had done to her, what it had taken from her. But that was the past, and she wasn't ready to share that part of herself, not yet. Instead she watched and waited. The guard's stillness mirrored her own, though his belonged to tradition and hers to necessity. His silence was ceremonial, almost regal. Hers was survival. She hadn't spoken much since the mission briefing. Not to her commander, not even to the man sitting across from her in the transport, his nervous tapping driving nails into her nerves. When he finally asked if she was all right, she had only nodded. Because what was she supposed to say? That she had spent half the night staring at the ceiling, rehearsing words she never spoke aloud. That every mission felt like peeling open an old wound, one she couldn't let heal because the job demanded she keep cutting it open. No, some things were better left in silence. Still, the weight of silence hurt. Her fingers trembled slightly against the cold metal railing. She tightened her grip, grounding herself. Around her, the crowd shifted again, whispers restarting. A child tugged at his mother's coat. Cameras clicked. The moment was over for them. But for her, it lingered. Because she knew what it was like to hold an entire room with nothing but presence. She knew the loneliness of standing still while the world kept moving. And she knew what it cost to be seen as more symbol than human. The guard turned, precise, polished, unshaken. She envied him that envied the mask, the certainty, the lack of hesitation. Her mask wasn't so perfect. She adjusted her scarf, lowered her gaze, pretended to study the cobblestones. But inside, her pulse beat hard against her throat. Because behind her silence, there was a mission. And behind the mission, a truth she had buried so deep she didn't even dare name it, not yet. Not while eyes could still be watching. She didn't belong here. She knew it with every step she took down the narrow stone streets, the palace at her back. The air was sharp with winter, her breath rising in little ghosts. The crowd behind her dissolved into chatter again, but she carried the echo of that silence, that single step with her. She remembered her own single steps, the hangar floor under her boots, the metallic echo in briefing rooms, the first footfall on foreign soil, knowing it might be her last. She remembered, she always remembered. But remembering came with a cost. As she moved deeper into the city, her mind replayed the voice of her commander during the briefing. You don't need to say much. You just need to watch, wait, and when the time comes, you'll know what to do. Simple words, heavy words. She hated missions that came wrapped in ambiguity. You'll know what to do meant something always went wrong. And something always did. Still, she had accepted it. She always did. The job had carved pieces from her, one assignment at a time. She told herself it was worth it, for the greater good, for the people who never even knew her name, for the faces she had sworn to protect but would never meet. But some nights, when the silence was too heavy, she questioned it. She questioned whether she was losing herself, or if there had been anything left of her to lose in the first place. And that question, unlike the mission, had no briefing, no answer, no clear objective. The café smelled of bitter coffee and old wood polish. She slid into the corner seat, facing the door, always facing the door. Her contact was late, deliberately late. She knew the tactic well: make the operative wait, test her patience, see if she cracked under the slow grind of anticipation. She didn't crack. She sipped the bitter coffee, felt its heat roll through her chest. But her mind wasn't calm, not really. Because the crowd outside the palace, the way they had frozen, it wouldn't leave her. Why did silence have that power? Why did stillness speak louder than commands? And why did it remind her so much of him? The thought slipped in uninvited. She gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles burned. She didn't want to think of him. Not here. Not now. Not when the mission demanded her full attention. But the memory was relentless. A desert sky, orange with dawn. His voice, steady but soft. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not say a word. And then, the gunfire that swallowed his silence forever. She blinked hard. The café blurred for a moment before coming back into focus. She had told herself she had buried that memory, but it was here, alive, walking beside her in every silence, in every stillness. And maybe that was why the guard's step had pierced her so deeply, because it wasn't just a step, it was an echo. The door creaked open. Her contact slipped inside, a man with lines etched deep around his eyes. His coat was too heavy for the mild chill, his movements deliberate, careful. He scanned the room, saw her, approached. No greetings, no wasted words. A folder slid across the table. Her fingers brushed the edges, but she didn't open it yet. She studied him instead, the lines in his face, the weariness in his eyes. He looked human, that mattered. Because sometimes, when you were surrounded by shadows and orders, it was easy to forget that humans were behind all of it. Humans with regrets, with sleepless nights, with burdens just as heavy. He cleared his throat. You know what to do. The same words, always the same words. Her lips tightened. She nodded once, tucked the folder into her bag. No questions, no arguments. But inside, questions burned. Why her? Why now? Why this city, this palace, this crowd that froze at the sound of silence? There was more to this mission. She could feel it, something unspoken, something hidden. And she knew deep down that sooner or later, silence would not just be an ally, it would be a weapon. But whose weapon and at what cost she didn't yet know. And so she waited. Waited with the memory of his voice in her chest. Waited with the echo of the guard's step in her ears. Waited with the weight of a mission she didn't yet understand pressing down on her shoulders. She was a soldier, a shadow, a survivor. But above all, she was a woman carrying silence like a blade. And she knew the time was coming when she'd have to decide. Would silence protect her or destroy her? How many secrets can a city hold before its silence becomes unbearable? That was the thought that shadowed her as she stepped back into the streets, the folder heavy in her bag. The café door clicked shut behind her, cutting off the smell of roasted beans and damp wood, but not the weight of what had just been passed to her. She didn't open it, not yet, not where eyes could linger, where shadows stretched too long. She would wait until she was sure no one was watching. But she felt it anyway, the sense of being followed. Not by footsteps, not by whispers, by something quieter, something she couldn't name. She pulled her scarf tighter, let herself blend into the flow of the crowd. Tourists with cameras, locals with errands, students with laughter. She matched their rhythm, let her body mimic their casual ease, though inside, her pulse was a drumbeat of vigilance. Every reflection in a shop window, every shift of movement in her peripheral vision, Every cough, every pause, she catalogued them all. And through it all, the memory of the palace guard's step clung to her. One sound, one motion, the way the crowd froze in reverence. She wondered if she would ever command such stillness, if silence could ever work for her instead of against her. But silence wasn't reverence in her world. Silence was a cover, a mask, a place to bury truths too dangerous to speak. And one truth was already clawing at the edges of her composure. The safe house was a narrow apartment tucked between faceless buildings. Its windows overlooked an alley lined with overflowing trash bins, the air sour with rot. The kind of place no one looked at twice, which made it perfect. She locked the door behind her, leaned against it for a moment, listening. Nothing but the groan of pipes and the hum of an old refrigerator. Only then did she pull the folder free. The paper inside smelled faintly of smoke, like it had been rushed off a printer too hot, too fast. Photographs, a floor plan, a name. She stopped at the name. Her breath caught shallow. She blinked once, twice, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something else. But they didn't. It was him. Not the one she had lost in the desert sky, not the one whose silence had haunted her, but someone connected. Bloodline connected. The kind of connection that made the mission more than a mission. She lowered the paper slowly, hands trembling. The silence of the room seemed to thicken, press against her ears. This wasn't coincidence, couldn't be. And suddenly the words from the briefing weren't instructions. They were a trap. You'll know what to do. Because what she had to do now wasn't about orders. It was about choice. The floor creaked under her boots as she paced the small space. Her breath fogged faintly in the cold air. She remembered the last time she had seen his face. Not this man in the file, but the one before him. He had been laughing, if only briefly. A laugh cut short by duty, by the weight of a rifle slung over his shoulder, by the endless horizon of a desert that belonged to no one. He had told her once that silence was strength. She hadn't understood then. She thought strength was fire, noise, action. She thought silence was absence. But after he was gone, she began to understand. Silence wasn't absence. It was presence without distraction. It was the memory of someone still echoing after their body was gone. It was the pause that lingered heavier than words ever could. And now here it was again, in this tiny room, suffocating her as she stared at the folder. How was she supposed to move forward knowing his bloodline was tangled in this mission? Her hands pressed against her knees. Her throat burned with the urge to speak, to say his name aloud, but she couldn't. Because once spoken it would be real, and reality was heavier than silence. The knock startled her. 3 raps, firm, evenly spaced. She froze. Her contact wasn't supposed to come here. No one was. Her hand slipped to the pistol at her hip, fingers curling tight around the grip. The knock came again. This time she didn't wait. She crossed the room in 2 steps, checked the peephole. A woman, younger, civilian clothes, a face she didn't recognize. But her eyes sharp, searching, not lost, not casual. The woman looked up, straight into the peephole, and then she mouthed something. A single word. She knew it instantly, even without hearing it. His name. Her heart lurched. She stepped back, pulse hammering. Who was she? How did she know? The silence stretched between them, thicker by the second. Finally, the younger woman lowered her gaze, stepped back from the door, and disappeared into the alley. Gone as quickly as she had come. But the silence she left behind was louder than any shout. That night she couldn't sleep. The mattress was thin, the radiator clanked, the city outside buzzed faintly with nightlife. But it wasn't noise that kept her awake, it was silence. The silence of unanswered questions. Who was the girl? How did she know his name? Why now in this city during this mission? And why did the file have to carry his bloodline like a shadow into her present? She rolled onto her side, stared at the folder on the table. The moonlight painted it in pale silver. Her breath caught again, chest tight. What would he have done? She could almost hear him, that soft steadiness, that calm in the storm. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not say a word. But strength felt different now. It felt heavier, it felt cruel. Because silence wasn't protecting her anymore. It was burying her. And maybe that was the mission's real test. Not what she would do with the target in the file, but what she would do with herself. Dawn came gray and heavy. She was on her feet before the sky shifted fully. Boots laced, scarf tight, bag slung. The city was quieter in the early hours, the streets washed in a thin mist. She moved quickly, each step careful but deliberate. She had to know, had to follow the thread even if it unraveled her. The file said he would be near the palace again. Not inside, not in the open, somewhere close, somewhere watchful. She found her spot across the square, half hidden by a column. Her eyes swept the crowd, searching for a face she had never truly seen but somehow already knew. And then there. A man older than she remembered him being, though she had never met him. His features carried the ghost of someone else. The same jawline, the same eyes. Her breath caught again. It was him. Or rather, it was what was left of him, reshaped in another body, another life. Her chest ached. She almost stepped forward, almost broke cover, almost let the silence crack wide open. But she didn't. Because she saw it. The way the palace guard stepped forward again, the crowd freezing, the silence spreading. And in that silence she realized he wasn't just a mission, he was a message. But what message, and from whom? She didn't know yet. And she wasn't ready to find out. Not until she could bear the weight of silence without breaking under it. The crowd began to disperse. She stayed rooted, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the man who carried the past in his face. She didn't speak, she didn't move. She only waited. Because she knew this was only the beginning. And silence, once again, would decide everything. Why hadn't she moved when she had the chance? The question haunted her as the crowd thinned, as the palace bells tolled the hour, as the man in the file disappeared into the river of strangers. Her body had refused her command. She had stood frozen, watching him walk away, the folder's weight growing heavier in her bag with each step he took. She told herself it was tactical restraint. That rushing forward in daylight with eyes and cameras everywhere would have been reckless. She told herself she had done the smart thing. But deep down she knew the truth. She hadn't moved because she wasn't ready. Not ready to face him. Not ready to face what his existence meant. Not ready to confront the silence that linked them both. Her boots scraped against the cobblestones as she turned into an alley, breath misting in the cool air. The city was waking now. Market stalls rattled open. Bread ovens exhaled steam and warmth. The chatter of merchants layered over the sound of trolley wheels on iron tracks. Life carried on. And she carried silence like a stone in her chest. At the safe house, she spread the file open again. The photograph stared back at her, flat and grainy, but the eyes were unmistakable. She traced a finger along the edge of one photo, as if touching it might bring clarity, but all it brought was ache. Her memory betrayed her. It replayed scenes she hadn't asked for, the desert camp, the heat shimmering above the sand, his laugh, low, quick, cut short too soon, and his words always circling back, haunting her. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not say a word. She pressed her palms against her eyes, forcing the memory away. But the younger woman's face appeared instead, the one who had come to her door, whispering his name without sound. Who was she? Why had she vanished without explanation? And more pressing, how had she known where to find her? The mission was slipping out of her control. Shadows were moving faster than her orders, weaving a net she couldn't see the edges of. And in that net, silence wasn't strength, it was suffocation. By late afternoon, she was back in motion. She tracked him through side streets and crowded trams, always 2 steps behind, never too close. He moved with a man who knew how to disappear in plain sight, never staying in one place too long, never walking the same route twice. But she was better. She had learned in harder places where a single mistake cost lives. Still, as she followed, she couldn't escape the question gnawing at her. What would she do if she caught him? Neutralize, interrogate, protect. The file gave no guidance beyond his name, his face, his connection. The orders had been vague, too vague. And the silence of those instructions left her stranded in the space between duty and conscience. She thought of the guard again, 1 step forward, no words, a command without a command. Could she do the same? Could she move without explanation, without justification, and live with the consequences? The thought made her chest tighten. Because consequences had names, faces, graves. She followed him into the market square, its air thick with spices and roasting meat. Stalls spilled bright fabrics, brass trinkets, fruit stacked like jewels. He paused at a stall, speaking to a vendor in low tones. She edged closer, her scarf hiding her face, her body blending with the crowd. And then sudden, sharp. Her gaze locked on movement. Not him. Her. The younger woman from the alley. She was here at the edge of the market, eyes scanning, searching. And then their eyes met. A jolt shot through her, sharp as a trigger pull. The girl didn't flinch, didn't look away. She only tilted her head ever so slightly toward the man at the stall. A signal. As if to say, this is him. Do you see? Do you understand? Her breath hitched. And in that heartbeat of stillness, she realized something. The girl wasn't here to threaten her. She was here to guide her. But why? And who had sent her? Before she could move, before she could close the distance, the girl vanished again, swallowed by the tide of bodies, leaving only silence in her wake. Night fell. The city's glow softened to amber, windows lit like lanterns against the dark. She sat alone in the safe house, the photographs spread like a deck of cards before her. The mission was no longer about orders. It was about him, about her, about what tied them together, unseen but unbreakable. She thought of the lives she had ended before, targets whose names meant nothing to her, missions where silence was easy, where detachment was armor. But this was different, because his name carried the echo of someone she had loved, someone she had lost. And suddenly the silence wasn't armor, it was a wound. Her hand shook as she reached for the photo again. She imagined walking up to him, breaking cover, saying his name aloud. What would he do? What would she do? The silence gave no answer. The knock came again. Same rhythm, 3 raps firm, even. Her pulse spiked. She approached the door, every muscle tight. This time when she looked through the peephole, it wasn't the girl. It was him. Her breath stopped. The man from the file, standing there, as if he had known all along where to find her. His eyes, haunted, steady, familiar in ways that cut deep. He didn't knock again, didn't speak. He only waited. And she didn't know if opening the door would save her or destroy her. Silence filled the room, heavy as stone. Her hand hovered over the lock. Her mind screamed with questions. How had he found her? What did he know? What did he want? And underneath all of it, could she face him without breaking? The guard's step echoed in her memory. One move, one act, no words. And she realized this was her moment. Her step forward. The choice that silence demanded. Her fingers closed around the lock. She turned it. The door creaked open. And there he was. Close enough to touch. The silence between them, louder than any battlefield. Neither spoke. Not yet. because sometimes silence wasn't absence. It was everything. And in that silence, she knew nothing about this mission would ever be the same again. Why hadn't he spoken yet? The question roared in her head as the doorway framed him, his figure half-lit by the dim hallway light. His presence filled the silence like thunder, though no sound escaped his lips. She waited for him to break it, for him to offer some explanation, a reason, anything. But he didn't. He only stood there, breathing steady, gaze fixed on hers. It was unbearable. The same silence that had held a crowd frozen at the palace, gates now pressed into her chest, threatening to crush the air from her lungs. Finally, she stepped back, a signal, not an invitation, not exactly trust, but a choice. He entered without hesitation. The door clicked shut behind him. The room was small, too small for the weight between them. He scanned it quickly, walls, corners, windows, like a man trained to never leave his back exposed. She recognized the habit. They were alike, more alike than she wanted to admit. She waited, but he didn't speak. And the silence stretched, taut, until her voice broke against it. "Why are you here?" Her words sounded foreign, like she hadn't used her voice in weeks. He studied her, his expression gave nothing. "Why are you here?" she pressed, sharper this time though her throat burned. His jaw tightened. His eyes flickered, not avoidance, not guilt, but something deeper, something guarded. Finally he spoke. "Because you were sent to find me." Her chest constricted. He knew. Of course he knew. Her hand curled into a fist at her side. "Then you know what that means." "I do," he said quietly. And the quiet in his tone was worse than anger, worse than defiance. It was acceptance. As if he had been waiting for this moment all along. She moved closer to the table, the folder still spread across it like evidence at a trial. "You've read it, haven't you?" he asked. Her silence was answer enough. He nodded once, slow. "Then you know who I am." Her throat tightened. Not just who he was, but who he carried. Bloodline memory, echo. She forced herself to meet his gaze. It doesn't change the mission. But the words rang hollow, even to her. He studied her again, searching her face the way a man studies a map before walking into unknown terrain. "Doesn't it?" he asked. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Because deep down she knew it did. Everything had changed. The air between them thickened with memory. She saw pieces of the past stitched into his features, the same jawline, the same eyes, the same stillness. And it tore at her. Because she had buried the past to survive, buried it so deep that silence became her shield. Now it stood before her in living flesh, refusing to stay buried. He lowered himself into the chair across from the folder, movement slow, deliberate. "You don't have to say it," he murmured. "I can see it in your eyes." Her body went rigid. "What do you think you see?" He hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "The same thing I've been carrying my whole life, the weight of someone we both lost." Her breath hitched. The silence inside her cracked, raw and painful. He knew. He knew. She turned away, packing to the window. The city beyond was blurred with rain, the glass trembling faintly with the sound of trams. She pressed her palm against the cold pane, grounding herself. "You don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. But the lie scraped against her tongue. Because he did. He knew exactly what he was talking about. His voice followed her, low but steady. "I know what it's like to live in the shadow of silence, to feel it press on your chest every day, to wonder if it'll suffocate you before you find a way to use it." Her eyes burned, though she refused to let tears fall. She had spent years mastering her silence, weaponizing it, surviving by it. But hearing him speak it aloud, hearing her own reflection in his words, was unbearable. Finally, she turned, her voice sharp. You don't understand what silence costs. He met her gaze calmly. Don't I? And in his eyes she saw the truth. The sleepless nights, the unanswered questions, the ache of absence that never healed. They weren't strangers at all. They were mirrors. And the realization made her want to shatter. The younger woman's face flashed in her mind again, the one who had knocked, who had whispered his name without sound. She stepped closer to the table. The girl, who is she? His eyes flickered barely, but she caught it. She came to me, she pressed, said your name without a sound. Why? He exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale that carried more weight than words. She's family, he said at last. Her chest clenched. Family. The word tasted like loss, like longing. She had no family left, not in the way he meant, not in the way that made you feel tethered to the world. And now she realized he did. And that was what made him dangerous. Because men with nothing to lose were reckless. But men with family, they would fight the world to protect it. And she didn't know if her mission was to destroy him or to protect him. The silence stretched again, broken only by the rain tapping against the window. Finally he spoke. You're not here because of orders, not really. Her pulse quickened. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. You're here because of him. Her knees weakened. She gripped the edge of the table, steadying herself. Don't, she whispered. But he didn't stop. You lost him too. The words cut like glass. Her breath broke shallow, and the silence inside her shattered into fragments. She closed her eyes, memory flooding her. The desert sky, his voice, his silence. The moment everything changed. Her hand trembled at her side, aching to reach for something, anything, that could anchor her. But there was nothing. Only silence. When she opened her eyes, his gaze hadn't wavered. He wasn't gloating, he wasn't prying. He was grieving too. And somehow that made it worse. For a long moment neither spoke. The rain softened, the city's hum dulled. And in that quiet she understood. This mission wasn't about orders or targets or files. It was about confronting silence itself. Hers, his, theirs. And deciding what to do with it. Finally she drew a breath, sharp and unsteady. If you know why I'm here, why come to me? He leaned back in his chair, exhaling. Because you deserve the choice, not the file, not the orders, you. Her chest constricted. Choice. It was a word she hadn't been given in years. She had lived by commands, by silence, by survival. But choice. Choice was dangerous. Because it meant responsibility. Because it meant facing the truth. And the truth was heavier than silence. Her hands pressed flat against the table. She could feel the folder beneath her palms, the mission's weight condensed into paper and ink. But the real weight sat across from her, alive, breathing, carrying echoes of the man she had lost. And she knew, whatever choice she made tonight would change everything. The mission, her silence, herself. He stood slowly, his chair scraping softly against the floor. I'll be in the square tomorrow, he said. If you want answers, that's where you'll find me. Her heart pounded. He didn't wait for her response. He moved to the door, hand on the handle. And just before he opened it, he looked back at her. His eyes held hers, steady, unflinching. Sometimes, he said softly, dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Then he was gone. The silence left behind was unbearable. And yet it was hers to fill. The room felt heavier after he left. The silence was no longer his, no longer theirs. It was hers alone. And it pressed in from all sides. She stood frozen, her palms still resting on the folder, though the paper beneath her fingers had begun to crumple from the pressure. He had left her with nothing but a place and a time. The square tomorrow. Simple words, but nothing about them felt simple. She released the folder slowly, backing away from the table as if the papers could ignite and burn her alive. Her body moved to the window on instinct, her eyes scanning the city below. The square was visible in the distance, though at this hour it was only a skeleton of what it would be tomorrow. The trams had stopped for the night, the stalls shuttered, the flow of people reduced to a trickle of shadows. Tomorrow it would be alive, and so would every risk that came with being there. Her chest tightened. He knew she'd have to choose, and he knew exactly what that choice would cost. She pulled away from the window, packing the small room. The boards creaked under her boots, every sound amplified in the suffocating silence. The girl's face flashed in her mind again, the whisper of his name without sound, her eyes full of something like faith. The man's voice followed, "She's family." Her throat constricted. Family. The word was a wound, reopening every time she thought it. She had buried the idea of family long ago, under dirt and loss, under the silence that became her shield. And now here it was, clawing its way back, demanding to be acknowledged. She pressed her hands against her face, drawing in a shaky breath. "Stay on mission," she muttered into her palms. "Stay on mission." But even as she said it, the words sounded hollow. The mission wasn't a compass anymore. It was a chain. And the file on the table was its weight. She turned back to it, the papers scattered like bones across the wood. Photographs, reports, witness statements. Cold ink pressed onto thin sheets, telling a story of a man marked for elimination. But the man she had faced tonight hadn't been paper and ink. He had been flesh, voice, memory. And now, silence no longer felt like her weapon. It felt like his. Her chest ached as she sat heavily in the chair, pulling the folder toward her again. One photo slid free, a surveillance shot grainy and distorted by distance. He stood in the frame, half-shadowed, his face tilted slightly upward. Even in poor quality, his stillness radiated. The same quiet dignity that had frozen the crowd at the palace gates, that had cut through her in the hallway. The caption at the bottom of the page blurred as her eyes burned. Target. She swallowed hard, her throat raw. How can a word so small carry so much weight? Her hands shook as she shoved the folder closed, the sound too loud in the quiet room. This wasn't clarity. This was torment. She needed air. The streets were damp with rain as she stepped outside, her hood pulled low. Neon signs flickered across puddles, painting the ground with fractured color. Every sound, the drip of water from a gutter, the distant rumble of a tram, echoed too sharply in her ears. The silence wasn't just inside her anymore. It was in the city. Watching. Waiting. She moved without destination, her boots carrying her through alleys and across empty squares. Her mind returned again and again to his words. You deserve the choice, not the file, not the orders, you. Choice. The one thing she had been denied for so long. Her life had been dictated by missions, by silence, by survival. Now, suddenly, the weight of decision sat in her hands, and it terrified her. Because what if she chose wrong? What if choice led to failure, to betrayal, to loss? She stopped under a flickering streetlight, gripping the cold metal pole until her knuckles whitened. Her reflection stared back from a puddle at her feet. Tired eyes, hollow face. A soldier carved by silence. A memory rose unbidden. Desert wind, sharp and hot against her skin. A man's hand gripping hers before letting go. The silence that followed his absence. She gasped softly, her chest twisting. She had buried him in silence. Now this man, the one carrying his echoes, was pulling her back into that wound. She didn't know if she could survive reopening it. A voice startled her. You look lost. Her body tensed instantly, hand darting toward the knife hidden in her coat. But when she turned, it was only a vendor sweeping rainwater from the edge of his stall. His eyes tired, his shoulders slouched. She exhaled slowly, forcing her hand to relax. Not a threat, just another shadow in the city. But it reminded her, threats weren't always obvious. Sometimes they wore silence. Sometimes they wore his face. Hours passed in her wandering, the city's hum dulling into background noise. By the time she returned to her room, exhaustion pulled at her bones. But her mind refused to rest. She sat at the table again, staring at the folder like it might answer the questions tearing her apart. Her fingers hovered above it, trembling. Finally, she pushed it aside. For once, she didn't want to read ink on paper. She wanted to face flesh and blood. She wanted answers from him, not from the mission. Her pulse quickened. Tomorrow, she would go to the square. Sleep was fractured. Dreams clawed at her, desert sand swallowing voices, the girl's face mouthing his name, the man's eyes reflecting her own grief back at her. Every time she woke, the silence was heavier, as though the city itself held its breath. By dawn, her decision was sealed. She would go, not because the mission demanded it, but because she demanded it. The square at midday was unrecognizable from the skeleton she had seen at night. It pulsed with life. Vendors shouting over one another, trams screeching to halts, children weaving through crowds with sticky sweets in their hands. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts, exhaust fumes, and damp stone. And beneath it all, a current of tension she couldn't shake. She moved through the crowd carefully, every sense sharp, every step measured. Her hood stayed low, but her eyes scanned constantly, faces, exits, shadows. And then she saw him. He was standing near the fountain at the center, still as stone amid the chaos. He hadn't dressed to hide. If anything, he stood in plain sight, a man daring the world to look at him and see more than a shadow. The square flowed around him, unaware of the silent storm building. Her breath caught, because he wasn't alone. The girl was there too, just a step behind him, her eyes darting nervously through the crowd. Family. Her pulse thundered. Every instinct screamed, this is a trap, a mistake, a risk too high. And yet her feet carried her forward. As she neared, his eyes found hers. No signal, no nod. Just that same steady gaze. The one that had frozen her before. The one that threatened to undo her now. The crowd's noise dimmed around her, as though silence had spread from him like a wave, pulling her into its tide. She stopped a few paces away, the fountain spraying mist between them. Neither spoke. Neither moved. But the weight of their silence told her one thing clearly. This was no longer just a mission. It was a reckoning. Why didn't anyone else notice? The question burned in her chest as the crowd swirled around them, oblivious. Vendors shouted prices, children laughed, trams groaned along their rails. Life carried on, blind to the storm building at the fountain's edge. He stood unmoving, eyes locked on hers, while the girl shifted nervously at his shoulder. Why didn't anyone see it? Didn't they feel it? The tension, the silence, the possibility of something breaking. Her hands itched, fingers twitching against her coat seams, not toward the weapon, not yet, but toward choice, toward action. She stepped closer, just enough for his breath to mingle with the mist rising off the fountain. And still neither spoke. She broke first. "What do you want from me?" Her voice was low, sharp enough to cut through the noise without drawing attention. His answer came in the smallest of gestures, a tilt of his head, his eyes flicking toward the girl. The girl lowered her gaze instantly, as if the weight of his silence had pressed her down. Her chest tightened. "Why her?" she whispered. This time his mouth opened. And yet no sound came. Not a word. Only a breath, a faint exhale, heavy with meaning but offering no explanation. It was as if he was daring her to fill the silence herself. Her anger flared. "No, that doesn't work on me," she hissed. "Not anymore. You don't get to decide with silence. You don't get to." But the girl interrupted. "She's not your enemy." Her voice was trembling, but it carried weight all the same. The girl's eyes lifted, meeting hers for the first time without fear. "She's your blood." The words landed like a bullet. Her knees almost gave out. "What did you say?" Her voice cracked, barely audible. The girl hesitated, then glanced at him again. He gave no nod, no confirmation, only that same unbearable silence. But the girl pressed on, as if the truth itself demanded to be spoken. "She's your sister." The crowd noise blurred, the square spun. For a moment the ground seemed to drop away beneath her boots, leaving her weightless, untethered. "Her sister." She stared at the girl, at the trembling hands, at the wide eyes that carried a flicker of something familiar. A shape in the jawline, a softness in the gaze. Memory clawed at her, fractured images of a child long ago, of voices cut short by fire and chaos, of silence swallowing names she had never spoken aloud again. Her throat closed. "No," she whispered, "that's not possible." But the girl's eyes, her eyes said otherwise. The man finally spoke. "It is." Just 2 words. And they broke her. Her breath hitched, chest heaving with the weight of years crashing into the present. Her hands trembled violently, the weapon at her hip forgotten. Why wouldn't you tell me?" she rasped, voice cracking. His gaze didn't waver. "Because silence protects." Her fury ignited. Protects who, me, her, or you?" The girl flinched, shrinking between them, but he stood steady, absorbing her anger like a stone wall. His voice, when it returned, was low, unshaken. "Sometimes truth destroys more than it saves." She wanted to scream, wanted to strike him, wanted to collapse at his feet and beg him to rewind the years, to explain how her sister had survived when she hadn't, to tell her why she had been left alone in silence all this time. But all she could do was breathe, ragged, shallow, broken. Her mind reeled, flashing between memories and the girl before her. The truth was a weapon, and it had just been fired. Around them, life carried on. A child dropped a sweet, crying until his mother replaced it. A tram bell rang, metallic and sharp. The fountain hissed with its endless spray. The world didn't pause for her revelation. And that was almost worse, because inside her world had stopped. She forced her legs to move, stumbling closer to the girl. Her voice broke as she whispered, "It can't be true." The girl's lips trembled. "I thought you were dead," she whispered back. "They told me you were gone, but he told me to wait, to trust the silence." The man's shadow loomed behind her, steady, unreadable. Her blood boiled. "You kept her from me," she spat at him, fury cutting through the fog of grief. "You decided what I deserved. You decided what she deserved." His jaw clenched. For the first time, his silence looked heavy, like it was costing him to carry it. She took a step closer, voice sharp. "You think silence is strength, but it's just cowardice." The words struck. For the first time, his eyes faltered. A flicker pain, regret, maybe even shame. But still, he didn't speak. And maybe that hurt most of all. Because even now, when the truth had shattered everything, he hid behind silence. The girl reached for her hand, tentative, trembling. "Please," she whispered, "not here, not like this." Her breath caught. Because the girl was right. The square was too open, too crowded, too full of ears and eyes that didn't understand the storm at the fountain. This wasn't where answers could be found. But she also knew. Silence had already dragged her through too many years of emptiness. and she couldn't let it win again. Her voice was steel as she looked him in the eye. "You don't get to keep her from me anymore." For a moment he said nothing, his silence screaming louder than any word. But then finally his lips parted. "You want her," his voice was low, steady. "Then you'll have to earn her, protect her, because the ones who wrote that file." His gaze flicked toward her bag, where the folder still weighed heavy. "They want her gone." The blood drained from her face. Gone. Her sister. The girl she thought had died years ago, now alive, only to be hunted. And she was holding the orders. The fountain hissed louder, the crowd noise fading into a low roar. Her hands shook as the truth crashed down. She wasn't just here for him. She was here for her. The mission wasn't to eliminate him. It was to eliminate them both. Her chest heaved, lungs burning, every breath a struggle. The silence between them deepened, thick with betrayal, grief, rage. But beneath it all, a new thread wound tight inside her, resolve. Because now, the choice was no longer about duty. It was about blood. And blood demanded more than silence. It demanded sacrifice. The man stepped back slightly, shielding the girl behind him. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "at dawn, the old train yard, you'll have to decide where you stand." And before she could respond, before she could demand more, he turned, guiding the girl into the flow of the crowd. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing only air. And then they were gone, swallowed whole by the city, leaving her with nothing but silence and the crushing weight of tomorrow. She stood at the fountain long after they disappeared, the mist dampening her skin, the crowd flowing past without notice. Her heart ached, her mind screamed, her body trembled. But inside, beneath the storm, something had shifted. For the first time in years, silence wasn't just something she endured. It was something she would break. And tomorrow, at dawn, she would prove it. Why did dawn feel heavier than night? The city was barely awake, its streets washed pale by the gray of early morning. Mist clung to the rooftops, thick and unmoving, as though the world itself was holding its breath. She adjusted her scarf, tightened the strap of her pack, and moved toward the edge of the city where steel tracks disappeared into fog. The old train yard. It loomed ahead like a graveyard of machines, its rusted skeletons stretching into silence. Carriages with shattered windows, engines stripped of purpose, steel rails warped by time. And yet, something about the place felt alive. As if it had been waiting. Waiting for her. Her boots crunched on gravel as she stepped between the rows of abandoned trains. The air smelled of oil and rain-soaked metal, thick enough to taste. She paused, scanning the shadows. Every instinct screamed caution. The yard was perfect for an ambush, angles, cover, vantage points. She ran her hand over the cold steel of a carriage door, grounding herself in the present. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a test. A reckoning. And she wasn't sure if she was ready. She thought of the girl. Her sister. The words still felt foreign in her mind, like trying to speak a language she hadn't used in years. But her face, those eyes, was undeniable. Blood didn't lie. Her chest tightened as the thought pressed harder. The file wanted her gone. Her sister, the child she thought had been taken by fire and silence. Alive, only to be marked for elimination. Her stomach twisted. How could she reconcile that? How could she carry orders that demanded she erase the last living piece of her own blood? A clang echoed from deeper in the yard. She froze, every muscle tightening. The sound was sharp, deliberate. Not the random groan of metal. Someone was here. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she moved toward it, her steps careful, measured. And then there. A figure emerging from mist. Tall, steady, silent. Him. And behind his shoulder, the smaller frame of the girl. Her sister. Her breath caught. They stopped several paces away, the mist curling between them like smoke from an invisible fire. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then his voice broke the quiet. "You came." Her jaw tightened. "Of course I came." His eyes searched hers, steady, unflinching. "Then you're ready to choose." The girl's gaze darted nervously between them, her hands clutching the frayed edges of her coat. "Please," she whispered, "not like this, don't make her." But he raised a hand, silencing her. And just like that, the silence pressed down again. Her heart pounded, rage and fear colliding inside her chest. "You knew all along," she hissed. "You knew she was alive, you knew what she meant to me." His face didn't waver. "I knew the truth would come for you, in time." Her hands shook as she stepped forward. "Time? You stole years from us. Years I thought she was dead. Years I carried nothing but silence. And now you expect me to believe this was for my protection." The girl flinched, her eyes wet. But he remained steady. Protection isn't always mercy. Sometimes it's survival. Her fury boiled over. "No, survival isn't silence, it's choice. And you never gave me one." The echo of her words rang against the steel walls, loud, raw. The girl trembled, looking between them like a child caught in a storm. And suddenly she realized this wasn't just her reckoning. It was hers too. Her sister's life was suspended between them, waiting for someone to break the silence. The man reached into his coat. Her body tensed, hands snapping to her weapon. But instead of a gun, he pulled a folded paper. He extended it, the mist curling around his arm. "Read it." Her fingers shook as she snatched it from him, unfolding with cautious urgency. It was a list. Names. Dozens of them. At the bottom, hers. And her sister. Her stomach dropped. "What is this?" His voice was low, steady. "It's what silence has hidden from you. The file wasn't about me. It wasn't even about her. It was about everyone who knows what we know, everyone connected. You're on their list. She's on their list. I was never the only target." Her hands trembled, the paper blurring as her eyes burned. Her name, her sister's name. Marked for removal. Erasure. She looked up at him, her throat raw. "Why show me this now?" His gaze hardened. "Because now you understand. Silence isn't absence, it's a shield. And the moment you break it, the moment you step forward, you make yourself visible." Her chest constricted. Visible. Exposed. Hunted. The girl's hand slipped into hers, trembling. "Don't let them take me," she whispered. "Please." The plea cracked her heart wide open. Tears stung her eyes as she looked at the girl, the sister she thought she had lost, the child grown into a shadow of silence. She couldn't lose her again. Not to silence. Not to them. Her voice broke as she looked back at him. "So what? You want me to hide her, to vanish into the same silence that kept us apart?" His face was stone. "I want you to decide if you can live with the noise that comes after you break it." The mist thickened around them, the steel of the trains groaning in the dawn air. Her breath hitched, her mind spiraling. She saw her sister's eyes. She saw the list with her name. She saw the years of silence stretching behind her, threatening to swallow her whole again. And then something inside her steadied. Her hands stopped trembling. Her chest lifted with resolve. She knew. She had always known. Her voice was soft but unyielding. "No more silence." The words hung in the air, heavier than bullets. The girl's hand tightened in hers, trembling with hope. For the first time his eyes shifted, no longer unbreakable, no longer stone. For the first time, silence seemed to wound him. The dawn light cut through the mist, spilling across the rusted rails. And in that fragile glow, she realized the real war wasn't in the missions. It was in the silence that stole choice, stole blood, stole years. And this war she would fight. Not for orders, not for files, but for her. For them. For the right to exist beyond silence. The man exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping as though he had carried the weight of her answer long before she spoke it. Then finally he nodded once. Then be ready. The train yard held its breath. Because silence had been broken. And nothing would ever be the same. The train yard never slept again after that dawn. Even in stillness, she felt the silence crackling around her like broken glass. The choice she had spoken, no more silence, still vibrated in her chest, its echo louder than thunder. And with it came the weight. The noise of a world that would now hunt her. The noise of truth breaking open. The noise of her own heart pounding, refusing to step back. The man studied her, the fog drawing hard lines across his weathered face. He wasn't smiling, but there was something in his expression she had never seen before, something dangerously close to respect. You'll have no refuge, he said softly. They'll come for you, for her, for anyone who stands near. Her grip tightened on her sister's hand. Then let them come. It wasn't bravado, it was necessity. If survival demanded silence, then life, real life, demanded defiance. The air trembled with a distant hum. She tensed. The man's eyes flicked upward, scanning the fog. The hum grew louder, rhythmic, mechanical. Drones. Her stomach clenched. So soon. The first pair cut through the mist, their red sensors glowing like embers. Searchlights carved sharp beams across the rusted skeletons of trains. Her heart pounded. This wasn't a warning sweep. This was precision. They knew. They had been waiting. Move, he barked, pushing her toward the deeper yard. Her sister stumbled, nearly falling as the gravel shifted beneath her feet. She pulled her close, forcing herself not to look back. Gunfire cracked, sharp and merciless, tearing through steel and glass. Sparks showered as bullets chewed into the carriages. The drones weren't alone. Shadows moved through the fog, boots on gravel, rifles glinting in dawn light. A kill team. For them. They ducked between two derailed engines, breath ragged, metal groaning under the assault. Her mind raced. They couldn't outrun them. They couldn't outgun them, not here, not like this. Her sister clung to her arm, trembling. I don't want to die, the girl whispered. The words cut deeper than bullets. She forced herself still. Her pulse, her fear, her rage, she pressed them down, forged them into clarity. Not silence. Focus. She turned to the man. Tell me there's a way out. His jaw tightened. There's always a way, but not all of us walk through it. Her stomach dropped. What are you saying? He glanced at the girl, then back at her. You chose noise. You chose to break the silence. Now someone has to hold the line while you carry her beyond it. Her chest tightened. No, not again, not like before. I'm not leaving anyone behind. His gaze hardened, voice sharp. You don't understand. They don't want me. They want you, her. You're carrying the fire they can't contain. If you fall, so does she. If she falls, so do you. But me. He steadied his rifle, checking the mag. I'm already gone. The roar of engines cut closer. More boots, more gunfire. Time was fracturing, falling away piece by piece. She grabbed his arm, desperation raw in her voice. You're not expendable. His eyes, steady, resolute, met hers. We all are. That's the lesson. The only question is what you give your last breath to protect. Her throat burned. She wanted to scream, to fight, to drag him with them into whatever storm lay ahead. But deep inside, a truth hardened like steel. He was right. Every mission, every silence, every shadow had led here. Some choices demanded sacrifice. Some demanded letting go. The girl tugged her sleeve, her voice trembling. Please don't let him. But the man had already moved, already taken his place at the line between dawn and fog, already raised his weapon toward the storm. And in that moment she saw it. This wasn't silence. It was his final noise. Gunfire erupted, deafening. The man unleashed a storm of bullets, cutting down the first wave of shadows spilling from the mist. Sparks lit the fog as drones exploded midair, their burning shells raining down. He moved like a force of nature, every step deliberate, every shot final. A wall between them and death. She pulled her sister toward the far end of the yard, her chest tearing with each breath. But every step felt like betrayal. Every step felt like abandonment. Every step was a knife in her heart. They ducked into a shattered carriage, breath ragged. Her sister's eyes brimmed with tears. He's going to die. She pulled her close, holding her tight against the thundering chaos. He's buying us a chance, we can't waste it. The girl shook, sobbing against her chest. But she couldn't cry. She couldn't break. Not yet. Not while noise still lived in her veins. They pushed through the carriage, stumbling over broken seats and glass, until they burst into the open yard beyond. The mist was thinner here, the dawn sharper. And in that light she saw it, an old service tunnel, half collapsed, but still breathing air from the city beyond. Escape. She shoved her sister inside, then turned back just once. The fog behind them burned with fire and gunfire, a storm swallowing the man whole. Her chest cracked. Every instinct screamed to run back, to fight with him, to end it there. But her sister's voice, small, trembling, anchored her. Don't leave me. And she knew. This was the choice. This was the war. Noise or silence. Future or grave. She turned, forcing herself forward into the tunnel. They emerged in the outskirts of the city, the dawn finally breaking in full. Her sister collapsed beside her, chest heaving, tears streaking her face. She wrapped her arms around her, holding tight, as though the world itself might rip them apart again. For a long time neither spoke. Only the echo of distant gunfire carried across the morning. The sound of sacrifice. The sound of noise. Finally, her sister whispered, "What now?" Her throat ached. She looked out at the city, alive and sprawling, a place of danger and hope. "They'll keep coming," she said, "for both of us." Her sister shivered. "Then what do we do?" She pulled her closer, pressing her forehead to hers. "We make them hear us." Her sister's eyes widened. "Hear us?" "Yes," her voice hardened with resolve. "They've stolen enough years, enough blood, enough silence. We don't hide anymore. We don't vanish. We fight, not just for us, for everyone on that list, for everyone they tried to erase." The girl's trembling slowed. For the first time she nodded, and in her eyes a fire sparked. Fragile, small, but alive. The morning spread across the city, gold breaking through gray. And with it came a vow, unspoken but unshakable. Silence had been their prison. Noise would be their freedom. And no matter what it cost, they would never be silenced again.